This ESPN podcast is brought to you by GEICO. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance. Visit geico.com.
The BS Report is a free-flowing conversation that occasionally touches on mature subjects. The BS Report. The BS Report with Bill Simmons.
Welcome to the BS Report, a Monday morning here in Southern California. We hit the Breaking Bad thing really, really hard on Grantland the last few days, and I have no regrets whatsoever because this is one of the great shows of all time, wrapping up the final 8. First of the final 8 was on Sunday night. By the way, quick plug for Grantland. There's like barely anything going on in sports right now other than PEDs and God knows what else. But I think we've had some really good content lately, and especially the 2002 soccer shoot that Brian Phillips broke down, and Andrew Sharp's piece on Honey Badger. Go to Grantland, for God's sakes. I feel like we're really in the zone right now as a site. Anyway, one of the guys who's responsible for that, our TV critic. I hate calling you a TV critic, actually. Let's call you someone who writes eloquently about television. Mr. Andy Greenwald, what's happening?
That is such a nice thing to call me. I love it.
Yeah. I don't like the word critic is kind of loaded, right? It just means I think of a critic and I think of somebody just sitting there pissing on stuff.
Yeah, no, I mean, I wouldn't want to do this if I didn't love the stuff I was writing about almost, 80% of the time. I mean, and when I don't like stuff, it's probably because it just makes me sad because I want to be writing about something I love. So, yeah, I'm with you.
We need a better word. So, this Breaking Bad thing, it does feel like heading into these last 8, it feels like a much bigger event than at any point in the show's history, and I think there's a couple reasons for that. One, I think everybody's caught up, or anybody who's ever going to watch the show between Netflix and iTunes and all these different ways to watch, and the marathons and however else, the DVDs. I think anybody who was ever going to watch this show seems like they're now in. So that was good. Then they did a great job. They just ran every episode all weekend, and it was impossible to not to get sucked in yesterday, the last few, especially when, the PGA Championship was kind of a drag and not a lot else going on a Sunday. And, the Mike episode, then the final of last season. And by the time that show started, I was just lathered up and ready to go. You had already seen it. How many of these episodes have you seen of the last 8?
Just the one we all saw last night. They're stingy with it. And I wouldn't want to see ahead anyway, because if I'm recapping a show, I don't want to be ahead of the audience. I like to experience it with everybody. And
it was I thought it was a really brilliant episode.
It was so good. I mean, that's the thing the show does that, unlike any other shows, I feel like so much of all the good TV we talk about over the last 10 years, it gets praise for, asking really big questions and taking really big chances, but never really delivering on it. It's a lot of it is about suggestion, and inevitably we're disappointed with stuff. Breaking Bad is the only show that just isn't afraid to deliver. I mean, it gave us something last night that I think most people would have been okay waiting 2 or 3 weeks for in that final confrontation.
Right. So from this point on, we're going to spoil some stuff, and we have JackO coming on a little bit later to talk about taking his daughter to her first Yankee game, and I'm going to probably make fun of him about Mariano Rivera and A-Rod. So if you want that, you can fast forward about 20 minutes until you hear the soothing sounds of JackO's voice, and that'll be fine. For anyone else who likes Breaking Bad, which I assume is most of the people listening to this podcast, we're going to keep going. So a couple fascinating things about yesterday.
Okay.
One, they went back to Walter with hair.
Yes.
Futuristic Walter.
Mr. Lambert.
And has no relation to Molly.
No, I've been wondering, actually.
Maybe. Could be Vince Gilligan's way of hitting on Molly in like a really weird way. So Klosterman on the podcast last week theorized this whole thing about how Walter White had to come back to finish and had this whole thing, and it's kind of in motion. Feels like, now he had seen the first episode, so that was part of his theory, but does feel like, there's some full circle. I couldn't believe that they gave away like the house and the neighbor. So obviously everybody knows, and like some major stuff happened. Yeah. If you had to predict, what do you think has happened in the future?
I think, well, first of all, it's just one of the most brilliant things Gilligan did, because he basically pre-spoiled part of the end game, right? When he introduced Mr. Lambert and the bacon and the big gun in the back of the car at the beginning of last season. And now he advanced it. And so it's kind of a cocky move, right? He's showing us where we're going without giving away the full story. So he's having a lot of fun with that already. And I think the thing that occurred to me after watching The Way It Starts last night when, clearly the family has been outed. I mean, Heisenberg is graffitied on the inside of the house. The kids are shredding in the pool. Carol, his neighbor, is just appalled when she sees him. Maybe she just doesn't like beards. But I think that people assumed when we first saw that gun that he was coming back to, like, get revenge. But it's possible, isn't it, that he's also coming back to help someone, that he's coming back to rescue someone. And I can't help but think that this final endgame, the one that we're seeing play out with Mr. Lambert from New Hampshire, involves Jesse. I feel like the Hank showdown is the short term, and the Jesse one, whether it's good or bad, is the long term.
Interesting. I thought I was actually surprised they didn't milk the Hank Walter moment until like the third episode.
Yeah, that's what all TV shows do now, and it was crazy that they didn't.
And it was, the fact that they didn't was really exciting in the moment. Like a genuinely exciting television moment. It was like, oh, this is going down. Just didn't expect it. I thought for sure they would milk it.
Because wouldn't we have been okay with the episode? It was a good episode. Like if he had just walked away, when Walt starts walking out of the garage, and maybe if we just left on his face, maybe with his eyebrow up or something, we would have been like, okay, we're ready to go. But then, of course, there's that slow turnaround, and you just can't believe everything you're seeing after that moment.
I would say that everything from the moment he kind of does the head thing, and he can't leave, and he turns around. It was a top 6 Breaking Bad moment. Just everything that happens from that point on. And I've had the luxury, unlike people like you that actually watch the show the way it should have been watched, because I watched all of these in such a short time frame. Like some of the stuff is still so vivid for me. And just that whole 5-minute scene, like the way it was written, the way it was acted, the way it was filmed was just off the charts.
Well, on the one hand, you almost have an advantage with that because in the show has only taken place over the course of about 1 year. And so when Hank is yelling at Walt and says, and he lists the things that Heisenberg has done to him, like the cell phone call saying Marie was in the hospital, like crashing the car on the way to the laundromat, like bombing the nursing home. I have to imagine even some diehard fans were scratching their head or saying, oh yeah, okay, now I remember that. But you, having seen all of it, you still had the same emotional impact with those moments that Hank had.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I was sitting there waiting for Hank. I actually wasn't surprised by the Hank panic attack because part of this whole thing was he had to just feel so stupid.
Yeah.
Because this whole thing was just staring at him. And he just, especially, if you're going to really pick apart this show, the biggest flaw of this whole thing was Walt having all this money to buy stuff because of the quote unquote gambling.
Yeah.
And he's, he has direct connections to Jesse and he knows how to make stuff and Hank just never putting everything together. But they also did such a great job of establishing Hank as smart, but kind of a doofus too, that, you can't, it's not that big of a nitpick, but when you're watching it that fast, episode after episode after episode on a binge watch, it was kind of hard to come away with that and go, come on, Hank, really? You can't see this one?
No, but the other thing the show did so well, and that's why I think the confrontation was so good last night, was it ended on that beat of Hank for the first time really seeing that he had no idea who this person was.
Yeah.
But there's also an element of total ignorance on both sides because Walt thought he could get away with all that stuff because he always thought, and this was established from the very, very beginning of the show, that Hank was a doofus. When in fact, slowly as this show has gone on, we've started to see that he has an exterior of a total dope, with the home brews and the bad jokes, but he's actually a really, really good detective, and he was slowly putting together other cases, slowly putting things together. I mean, until Walt upended him at the end of last season with the prison massacre, he had everybody lined up. I mean, he had the case cracked. So in a way, they're both seeing each other for the first time.
It's a little like A-Rod and Bud Selig. A-Rod thought Bud Selig was A-Rod thought Bud Selig was such a doofus that he could just get away with anything. The really underrated part of the end of last season and the beginning of this season is Hank's over at Walter's house, excuses himself to go to the bathroom.
Yep.
And it's not just that he did a number 2,
Yep, and I see where you're going with this, yeah.
He went all in. He's like, this was one of those, I'm hanging out in here, I'm going to read a book as I'm doing this. Like, I felt like he kind of breached the guest code a little bit.
No, you didn't
I
even say
invited
the
you
worst
for
part.
dinner. What?
No, so you didn't even say the worst part. He went into the master bedroom. He didn't even bathroom. He didn't even go to the guest bathroom.
Right. He uses the best. Goes into the master bedroom, uses the best bathroom.
Yes.
And he's in there. He's setting up house. Like it's like he's at his own house. I had a lot of problems with that by Hank. I lost a little respect for Hank. You got to respect somebody else's house.
Yeah, I think
Sneak
that's right.
in, do your business, and get out. Like if you have to go, you have to go. But this isn't like even Joe House wouldn't do this.
Are you even like maybe after like a New Orleans binge or something?
Maybe after House Eats 3, House May. But I don't even think he gets the Walt Whitman book. I think he's just trying to get out of there. Anyway.
I think you could, if you want to do a really terrible metaphor that Jacoby doesn't want me to make, you could probably suggest that Walt has done a similar bit of business to Hank's house and family in the larger sense.
Oh, I like it.
You know, that they're sort of they're doing their business all over each other's houses, like dogs. So we could go with that, but we could also stay away.
All right, gambling props. Over under episodes left that Hank has before he's murdered.
Well, you think he's out. You think he's going to be taken off the board.
Let's say I give you 3.5 episodes for Hank. So if you bet the over, you're saying he's going to live to see episode 6. If you bet the under, you're saying he's dead by midway through episode 5. What would you take?
I don't think he's going to die, but I take your bet because I think he's going to be removed from the board one way or another. Either he's no longer the threat or he's incapacitated or something. And I would put, okay, so help me out with this. So I predict that if that happens around episode 4. So
right. So you're going under.
So I'm going under.
You're going under if you think that. If you think Hank's making it the whole season, you'd bet the over.
Well, I think he's surviving, but I feel like I'm trying to nuance your question in the house.
I don't think he makes it.
You think he's out?
I think he's out. I think it's over for Hank midway through the season. Wait, I forgot something before we get back to this.
Yeah.
The flash forward.
Yes.
Can we say that Lost created that? Because, I mean, looking back at Lost, which that's a whole other podcast, whether you'd run back the whole Lost experience again or not.
Totally
knowing that the last season would turn out to be so disappointing. I'm more disappointed by the day.
I am too. I still get upset by it. I still defend their right to tell the story that they wanted to tell, but man, was that a bummer of a story at the end.
If you gave me the choice of the whole Lost experience could unfold the way it did, or the moment Jack says we have to go back, some maniac at ABC canceled the show and we just never know what happened, I could take a pill and that would be how the show ended and that's how I'd remember it in my head, I would take the pill.
Yeah, but then you would take the pill and you'd wake up and Netflix had given them 24 episodes to wrap it up. Because it would have been such a cult favorite and everyone would have been so excited. So I bet we would have gotten maybe even a better resolution at this point.
Would you say We Have to Go Back was the greatest moment of that show?
Yeah, I mean, the two moments. I mean, the end of the pilot was one of the best ever. You know, when they get the French woman and the polar bear and Where
amazing.
Are We? I mean, that was unbelievable.
The pilot almost doesn't count as a pilot. That was a movie.
It was a movie. J.J. Abrams
They spent like $13 million.
Yeah.
It's like you can't compare that to a conventional pilot, but I guess since it's technically a pilot, you can. But that was a $13 million movie that they made thinking, if they don't pick this up as a show, at least we got an awesome TV movie out of it that'll win an Emmy.
But I also think you're talking about something that you got at when you mentioned, you know, how surprised you were that the Hank and Walt confrontation happened, because that moment and all of a sudden Jack has a beard and it's actually the future and they've gotten off the island. Those are both moments where TV really ripped up the rule book and you suddenly felt like you were in a place you've never been before. And for as much as we credit the last 10 years as being this golden age and brave storytelling, most TV shows follow a track. You know, they just are better at hiding the rails. But those were both moments where we're just totally surprised that they went for it. And because, you know, people don't want to, showrunners don't want to lose their jobs. I mean, they don't want to get too risky. And so these are moments of extreme confidence. And I think Breaking Bad's going to pay off, whereas Lost ultimately maybe didn't.
And the grandfather of this whole genre, obviously, Pulp Fiction.
Yeah,
and the fact that, the time jumps and narrative and something in the moment and that person coming back. It's been almost 20 years since that movie came out, and especially if you didn't see it in the theater when it happened and you're too intimate with how the movie goes, you don't really think of it that way. Like seeing that in the theater for the first time when they jumped around was like legitimately shocking.
Travolta's whole arc, when he's like you think he's your main character, then all of a sudden, spoiler alert, but he gets, let's just say, dealt with like almost as an afterthought.
We can spoil Pulp Fiction. It's been 19 years. If you haven't seen Pulp Fiction at this point, you need to reevaluate things.
Look, I don't want to waltz into your podcast like Hank into Walt's bathroom. I don't want to mess anything up.
No, it's John Travolta dies in the middle of Pulp Fiction. If you don't know this, turn my podcast off. I don't want you as a listener. But then Travolta came back, and it was like, what? But it was so awesome how they pulled that off. And what's interesting is not a lot of TV shows have done this.
It just takes confidence. You have to know the end game, and you have to have absolute confidence that you can get there in a way that is worth it. It's what I wrote in my piece about Breaking Bad last week about the endings of TV shows. I mean, TV up until recently was only ever supposed to go in one direction. It was never really going to end. So it was always better to asking questions than answering them.
Do you think Mike comes back this season?
Oh, Mike?
Mike. What if Mike's not dead? We never saw him die. We never saw him die.
No, he was in the trunk. His body was in the trunk.
What?
Remember?
No.
In the beginning of the last season finale, in Gliding Overall, Todd comes back with the car, and he and Walt get the acid ready to melt Mike in a barrel like they do everybody else.
I forgot.
Yeah. I want to be with you. I want him back so badly, but
my problem with that was I think I watched that at like 2:45 in the morning in Miami or something. That was one of those where it's like, I got one left. I got to do it.
How did you? This show makes people nuts when you watch like 2 or 3 in a row. It's like a jittery drug thing. Like, how did you do this and then go on television the next day? How did you hold it together?
I think I think I really did kind of go nuts during the whole playoffs.
Okay.
I look back and it's like, I think I wrote 4 columns the entire playoffs. I was wearing makeup all the time. I'm watching 55 Breaking Bads and living out of a suitcase in a hotel room. And I think I might have gone crazy.
We have no way to prove it, but
yeah, listen, put it this way. I don't know if I was sane. So maybe I did. I don't know if Breaking Bad is a show that's meant to be watched like that. I mean, obviously it's meant as in the TV medium because it's so awesome and whatever, but it's such like a weird show. Like the other funny thing was I was watching them late at night in these hotel rooms and sometimes falling asleep while I was watching them. And I don't have to pick them up the next night. So literally the last thing, it's the third time I've said literally in this podcast for some reason. The last thing I would see as I'm falling into a sleep state is some sort of Breaking Bad moment. Like that's not healthy either. I think you're right. I think it did kind of drive me crazy.
You must have had terrible dreams.
I did. What was much better for me is when we banged out Scandal, my wife and I, when I got home. And now there's a show where you can fall asleep. It's campy. It's over the top. It keeps your interest, but you can also fall asleep, and it's not the worst thing in the world. Your spouse or girlfriend or boyfriend could just fill you in the next day.
It's the equivalent of like, if you've eaten a delicious dinner and then you're totally full, but the one thing you might have room for is ice cream. Like you always can somehow find room for dessert late at night.
Yeah.
That's that show.
So you like Scandal?
Yeah. I'm nowhere. I'm clearly not as caught up on it as you and the missus, but I've dipped into it and it's fun. I mean, I think that it's doing, sometimes people get a little too caught up that every show has to be as good as The Wire, or because not every show is trying to be The Wire or Breaking Bad. Like shows can be really good at doing the very specific thing they're trying to do, and Scandal does that crazy hyperactive soapy stuff better than anything.
And I gotta say, like, even though Scandal is intentionally over the top and it's a soap opera and it's just patently ridiculous, they had a couple great episodes in that show. I think the 7 people who watch Scandal know what I'm talking about. The 752 episode was really, really well written and well acted and well executed, like on the level of like some of the best Lost episodes.
And doesn't that show also get at that thing we're talking about? It like just you suddenly feel like there's no more net. It'll just take a chance that other shows would be too scared to take. Yeah.
And well, it also helps. It has a really likable lead.
Yes, it does. Who's fun to watch.
Who's really fun to watch and you're rooting for her. I'm not positive she's a good actress, but she's a super likable actress. But maybe when you're binge watching, it's easier to pick this stuff apart. But she does have a couple ticks that if you're watching 25 episodes in 2 weeks, you'd be like, all right.
That's a lot.
We're not watching Meryl Streep here, but she's super likable.
Like if she watched 25 episodes of herself in 2 weeks, she would find those too, though, right? I mean, that's a lot.
Yeah, you're right. Everybody has ticks. But she's really great and super likable and married Nnamdi Asomugha, the former Eagle.
I know. His life just gets better and better, even though he ruined mine.
Even though he ruined your team.
Yeah, that's right. Not my life. Sometimes I forget.
Are you rooting for Andy Reid or no? Like deep down, kind of, sort of, a little bit?
Yeah. I mean, I never was mad at that guy. I mean, he gave us the best seasons of football in my lifetime, so yeah. I feel like putting him in a town with barbecue is dangerous, though. Have you already covered this?
I don't know if dangerous is the right word. I think fatal. Potentially fatal. I mean, might be. It's very worrisome. But here, I've heard this theory, and I agree. And it's funny that he's living in the barbecue capital of the world now. But let's be honest, Philly isn't exactly gluten free.
That's a strong point. It's a strong point. But the cheesesteak thing, I mean, while delicious, it's not like the fabric of the city. It's not like the one of the defining cultural. People are going to flame me for this, but I would say it's not one of Philly's most defining cultural exports. Well, Kansas City, I mean, that is barbecue, right? I mean, you can't go anywhere without people saying, like, we make the best one. You got to try this here. Just have a burnt end, you know? Like,
see, now we're on Dave Jacoby's corner. I don't know if he's listening to this podcast or not. He might be in the studio. He started out, but then he left. But Jacoby has very strong feelings about things that are severely overrated.
Uh-huh.
Like he thinks live music is secretly not good. Right. For the most part, and nobody wants to admit that this was something that seemed like an awesome idea in 1976, but now in this day and age, like it's not nearly as fun to go to a concert as everybody seems to think it is, unless you're stoned out of your mind.
But yeah.
He might not be wrong. I vaguely remember him having a whole cheesesteak rant about Philly and how the whole cheesesteak thing is really overrated, as is the deep dish pizza and some of like the signature things.
All
the
signature foods in a city are overrated.
Oh, there's Jacoby. See, that's his rant.
In Chicago, your pizza slices in New York, cheesesteaks in Philly, croissants in Paris, all overrated. You can get good quality anywhere else.
And you left out the number one, clam chowder in Boston. 90% of the clam chowder in Boston is awful. It's awful.
It's just cornstarch and glue, right? But
yeah, it's awful. And
I would argue him on pizza in New York, but what do you think about the idea that the signature food is actually not? I agree with him that it's not the best food, because the better sandwich in Philadelphia, as anyone from Philly will tell you, is the roast pork Italian sandwich. That is better. That is just demonstrably better than a cheesesteak. Right.
But the tourists go in. I always used to feel bad for the tourists in Boston, because they would come in and they'd order the clam chowder, and 90% of the time they're ordering from this place where, like, A, you're probably going to get sick from eating the clam chowder, and B, it's not like the real clam chowder. And in general, clam chowder is like such a high-risk order. It's 90% of the time going to suck.
In the summer, and you order a hot, gluey clam chowder, and then isn't there like the Freedom Trail around Faneuil Hall and all that? Can you make it? I mean, isn't that an Olympic event?
It's... You should just do yourself a favor. Don't get the clam chowder unless you're at Legal Seafood's got pretty good clam chowder. There's a couple other places, at least when I lived there, that we get. But
and there's a Legal Seafood in the airport. Just get your chowder to go, and then go to the other good restaurants, right?
It's risky. I wouldn't get clam chowder in an airport.
That's true. Right? Not if you're getting on the plane. If you're getting out, maybe.
Yeah, if I'm getting food at clam chowder, I want to make, or at Legal Seafood or the airport, I want to make sure it's cooked. But I think Jacoby, this is a great point by him, and I'm going to plan on stealing it and editing him out of the podcast, even though he's the editor.
I think it's a good idea. I feel like I've been trying to avoid House Eats 3, but this podcast keeps going back to it one way or another.
Well, what's interesting is the signature foods of cities are usually not what the public perception of the signature food is, right?
That's right.
Like in Chicago, the thing that the real people who pass through Chicago or live in the Midwest, like they talk about Garrett's popcorn.
Yeah, or the hot dog. Great hot dog.
Yeah, or the hot dogs. But Garrett's popcorn is like, you go through Garrett's popcorn and there's one giant line in the airport, and it's for the Garrett popcorn stand, because everybody wants to grab some before they leave.
Yeah.
I would say that's more signature than freaking deep dish. By the way, deep dish pizza is disgusting.
It's horrible. It's not even pizza. People are going to get as mad about this as when we talked about like the second
thing
on Game of Thrones, but it's a casserole. It's not pizza.
It's a horrible thing to put in your body. It really is. Like all it does is put you in a coma for 3 hours. Like, why would you want to put deep dish pizza in your body?
I'm so glad the Bulls weren't in the NBA Finals, because then you would have been forced to eat deep dish pizza and popcorn, watch Breaking Bad, and then, I mean, God knows what would have happened on there. Magic Johnson's suits maybe they never would have recovered.
I will say this about deep dish pizza. Like, the first 2 bites are absolutely delicious.
Yeah, there's your $1 million idea, is just like miniature deep dish pizzas. Just 2 bites. That's all anyone really wants.
Or serve it for like $1, just 1 bite. We just bring it on a small plate with 1 bite, and it's like per bite you pay $1.
That's my theory about silver dollar pancakes as a side item at brunch, because no one really wants to eat a giant sweet plate of pancakes. They want to get their eggs or their bagels or whatever, but then you want that 1 bite.
Yeah. Well, I don't know how we got on this tangent.
It's important stuff.
I blame myself. But back to Breaking Bad quickly. So Walter White dead or alive after the last episode?
Dead. Absolutely. I am all in on this. That I just don't see how he can survive. I don't know how it's going to happen or why, but I think the whole show has been built. It's like I wrote in my piece. It's a doomsday device. The show is built to end. It's the end of it. This show is about the end of his life and how he chooses to go out. Jesse, alive or dead? This is the real question. That's the thing that everyone's watching for at this point, don't you think? Like, I think that he's coming back to. I have some theory that maybe he's escaped, but Lydia and the Czechs and the drug people, know maybe they figure out that Jesse knows how to cook too, so they hold him hostage, and Walt has to come back as like one final, one last thing he has to do to make things right. Skyler, alive or dead? I think alive. I think we would not survive, and Vince Gilligan would not survive the wrath of the fans if he's dead. What do you think? Skyler? Oh no, I'm sorry. I thought we were on Jesse still. Do you think he's alive? Oh yeah, Jesse. I think Jesse dies. I think the Fredo corollary comes in here. Wow. I think the biggest emotional impact move is to kill Jesse. That would be one of the most emotional moments in the history of television and possibly the entire entertainment medium. I mean, if and I hate to say this word, but if the penultimate episode of the series ends with that, with Walter closing his eyes and pulling the trigger, sort of like what Jesse did at the end of season 3, yeah, I mean, the internet would break, as would we would all break. Think of the parallels here, right? Godfather 2, Michael kills Fredo. Scarface, Tony Montana kills Manny. Yeah, you're right. Spoiler alert. Sopranos, Christopher doesn't make it. What about this? What if Skyler kills Jesse somehow? What if there's like a that's almost like Diane Keaton at the end of Godfather, She kills his son in a way, thinking that Jesse's pulling him back in when maybe he's not. There's some mistake, because Skyler really stepped up when Lydia came to the car wash, and made it clear that she's not going to let Walt get dragged back into this life. That doesn't get enough. Attention. Is the great job Skyler's doing running the car wash. I mean, that's the most lucrative car wash in America. It's unbelievable how well that car wash is doing, especially in New Mexico. Right. It's not like they're in Beverly Hills. They're not in Malibu charging $100 a wash. Yeah. So you think? What about? See, I'm a little disappointed in Walt Jr. I was kind of hoping they'd kind of spread his wings in the last season, a little like AJ Soprano. Yes. When AJ Soprano was in plots and stuff for no reason. Like, everyone who thinks David Chase is a genius really needs to reevaluate just on the way of how the AJ Soprano career arc was handled. He should have been killed halfway through the 3rd season when they realized that kid couldn't act. Just get rid of him. They were stuck. And then they kept trying, though. I think that's the problem. Yeah, like on Homeland, all respect to my boy Chris Brody, but you don't see him carrying any of the A story, Because when you cast someone in the first season, you're pretty much stuck with them unless you pull a Mad Men and just keep recasting the part like they did with Bobby Draper. But David Chase kept going. He kept passing the ball to AJ.
David Chase, thought of as such a genius that there's like a 17,000 word breakdown of the final scene of The Sopranos and all the touches that David Chase allegedly put in there. And you'd have to have an IQ of like 270 to do all the things that David Chase allegedly did in that last scene. And yet gave Robert Eiler the ball over and over again in crunch time. Wasn't even just like running a couple plays for him in the second quarter. It's like, clear out for Eiler right now. Another big Eiler scene right now. Come on. I'm not buying the David Chase genius thing. I'm just not.
I love the finale of The Sopranos. I will rep that forever, but no man has done more to increase his own reputation by not saying anything about it than David Chase. Because he just let all of that go. He never said a word about it, which is brilliant. Because all that stuff then filled the space that he left behind.
Right. I'm gonna slightly change what I said. He was a genius as far as TV people go.
Yeah.
I think you would have to be an actual genius on the level of Albert Einstein to pull off all the things that Chase allegedly pulled off in that final scene, and I agree with you. Like a lot of people after Gandolfini died, I couldn't help but watch a couple Sopranos episodes, and, it's kind of like your own little way of mourning, one of the great characters and by proxy actors that we've had on TV. And I ended up watching the final episode again. And really the fundamental problem of that episode was that when it ended, they didn't just put the little HBO logo on the bottom, so we knew that it faded to black. All they had to do was do that, and it would have been one of the great endings of all time. But the reaction, Sal and I have argued about this to the death. My friend Sal thinks that it's the biggest travesty in the history of anything, and is still really angry about it. And if you bring it up to him, you just be prepared to hear him spew invective for 15 minutes. But Sal is the one thing we agree on is, like, if you're ending a show like that, the first reaction everybody can't have is, did my cable go out? Like, that's it. Nobody can argue that point. If your reaction is my cable went out, then you did a bad job doing the ending, period.
Especially because the whole point of that ending and why I like it is because it was so decisive. If you understand his intention, you don't think your cable went out, then you realize that this guy told the story he wanted to tell and then literally unplugged it. He was done. And he dropped the mic and walked away. And I respect that, because when these guys are telling their own stories and they're empowered to do so by the network, you got to live and die by the results. And, that's what happened with Lost, and that's what happened with Sopranos. And I would rather see a personal, non-focus grouped ending to one of these shows, rather than like a happy montage where we see everyone 10 years later or whatever. I would rather see what they want to tell us and then process it. But you have to know that you're seeing something that had a point. You can't think that your cable went out. That's key.
This is my last question for you, and then all your other Breaking Bad thoughts you can do. You and Chris Ryan have a podcast on the Hollywood Prospectus where I'm sure you're going to talk about Breaking Bad for 45
minutes. Every week we're ready to go.
And I feel like if I'm Chris Ryan right now, I feel like Simmons just kind of stepped in and had sex with my wife right before I was about to have sex with her. That's how I feel. So sloppy seconds to Chris Ryan.
That used the word Bigfoot. He did say that.
Here's my last question. Vince Gilligan was on that the Breaking Bad post-game show last night. Which, if they don't invite me on that show in the next 8 episodes, I'm never talking to Chris Hardwick again. I've never met Chris Hardwick, by the way. But are showrunners too available? Like you just complimented David Chase about the mystery and the way he handled it, and the whole thing about how great it is that he let his work speak for himself. Shouldn't all these guys do that? Why do these showrunners have to then shape what we just watched and give little hints and do interviews? And I wouldn't do any of that stuff if I was a showrunner.
Well, I think there's a fine line, and I say this as someone who also needs them to be that way sometimes in order to get content for Grantland.com. But I think that there's a fine line to walk, because, they should let the experience speak for itself, and they should let us appreciate and enjoy it as, unspoiled as possible. And I think that for the most part, these guys have gotten clearly media trained on how to do that, how to say something without saying anything. Yeah. But as someone who's, I'm really, really interested in the process, and particularly in the writing process. And then even further, the process of how do we have all these moving pieces going into the final 8 episodes. What do we decide to do? What do we decide not to do? What are those decisions like? I love that stuff. And I love reading, the oral histories of these things after the fact for that reason. So I kind of love the fact that the people who actually write the shows have become public faces of the shows in the last 10 years. It's taken some of the power away from the networks and the suits and given it back to the creators, so we get endings like Sopranos and also like Lost. But I agree with you that I mean Vince Gilligan appeared on that so he could because to please the network, and I'm sure he wants people to watch the rest of the episodes. But I do wish that they would let it ride, let it be what it is, and then maybe talk about it later. Let take a beat. I agree with you on that.
I don't like it. I'd rather have mystery of who Vince Gilligan is and what his intentions were.
Right.
Than rather have him like playing off Julie Bowen and playing coy. Like, it's like, come on.
I mean, at a certain point, these guys have egos like everybody else, probably egos a lot bigger than everybody else. And it's very flattering when everyone in the world wants to talk to you and not just the actors. I mean, with Lost, Houston and Lindelof were on The Tonight Show. I mean, they were everywhere. Probably ultimately, I would say that they're disadvantaged, except they're incredibly rich. So it probably did work out for them.
Yeah, you're right. They were almost too available.
But
I like how Chase handled it.
But he just went to France. He just gave a few quotes to Steppenwall and just went to France.
Right.
But wait, I have a question for you before we go, because you and Chuck talked about a lot of this stuff on Friday.
Yep.
And I feel like you were saying that as much as you also don't want the showrunner spoiling the experience of watching by talking about it afterwards, you guys were also saying that's one of the reasons why you don't read recaps. Is that consistent with the truth? Is that the way you feel?
No, I don't read. I always read your recap because you're ready for Grantland, and that's my site. No. I don't read like 12 recaps.
Right.
Like, I'm not one of those, like, I don't do that whole circuit. I'm not against people that do it, but I'm more like, I look at recaps almost like the writer is my friend, and the writer is sending me a long email about what they thought of the show. And ultimately, that means I don't want to read just anybody's recap. I actually, on Friday, I read a whole bunch of pre-8 episode, all the different angles people were taking. And a lot of TV Tattle had a lot of them. And I clicked on a lot of them. I was just interested. People have a lot of theories, and some of them are fun. Some of them are stupid. But when you get to the actual recaps, like, I think my theory is you trust the one or two writers that you like, and whatever else anyone is saying.
Yeah, I agree. You have to make an investment in someone that you want to watch these shows with, that you want to be talking to the next morning, basically. And that was why that was what I was thinking when you guys were talking about how a lot of us who write about TV seem really chummy. And it's mainly, though, I think because we only recap shows that we like and that other people like. I feel like the shows that we don't like A Low Winter Sun, the other AMC show that I panned on Friday, nobody wants to read a hate watch recap, really. Because what's the point?
Last thing, my mom really enjoyed your Game of Thrones recaps.
That is
wants
very
to meet
nice.
you. Wants to meet you next time you're in town, and probably your role there would just be to nod and listen as she talks for about 45 minutes, because that was
always my demographic with anyone. I would just be nice to the mothers, and then hopefully it would work out. That was always my play. So I'm going to try this really hard now with yours.
You're her Game of Thrones buddy.
That's so nice.
I actually think she met Chris Ryan and for some reason thought he was you and congratulated him for 10 minutes on his Game of Thrones recaps, and I think he just nodded and pretended to be really nice and didn't want to say anything.
I have to say, I didn't want to say if it's not appropriate for air, but I did meet your mother. That sounds like that.
Oh, so it was you? Okay.
I did meet your mother. I met your mother at a Game of Thrones event, because that's who your mother. That's how cool your mother is.
Yeah, she went. She goes to a bunch of the HBO events because we have a friend who throws some of them. And she told me she met you, and I was like, I don't think he was here, and I just assumed it was Chris Ryan. So I'm really glad it was you. That makes me feel a lot better. You know what? I'm not putting my mom in a home. It's going to be fun.
Not only was she nice about that, she was also probably right not to pose for a Game of Thrones themed photo with broadswords with me and Emily Yoshida, because that's the other thing was going on at that party, and she kindly refused. So I think that was also smart.
My mom was really upset because Peter Dinklage Dikembe Mutombo'd her when she went up to him.
No.
And I was like, yeah, and she was all fired up to talk to him, and I was like, Mom, you have to understand he's a famous person. Like, that whole night he probably had people coming up to him. It doesn't mean he's, and you probably had a couple glasses of wine in you, and he was probably like, oh, I'm staying away from this lady. or he's just a jerk. But you can't like let that affect the show. But she's like, no, I've always defended that character, and now I'm mad at him. And she's in a feud with Peter Dinklage. She doesn't even know who she is. Yeah.
I'm loving the analogy of Peter Dinklage to Kembe Mutomboing someone. I feel like there's never been an analogy that stretched that tall. Like that's incredible.
Thank you. We just made history in the BS Report. Andy Greenwald, we look forward to your recaps all season here. Breaking Bad, episode 2 coming this Sunday. As always, a pleasure. Good luck with the Eagles. Talk to you soon.
Thanks, Bill.
All right, we're going to call my buddy JackO.
Complex Litigation, this is John.
Johnny.
What's up, buddy?
How are you?
Good, thanks. How are you?
Oh, I'm not talking into the mic. I should probably try to talk into the mic,
hard to hear you there.
Yeah. You know what happens when you don't talk into the mic? The other person can't hear you.
Yeah.
So, first of all, fascinating Yankee weekend. We wanted to check in with you because not only did Mariano Rivera blow his 3rd straight save, and I don't know if you want to have the funeral for his career today or save that for its own podcast. That's up to you, Johnny.
Oh my
That's
God.
up to you. Great career.
Blasphemy.
Great career. I have the shovel right here if you're ready to do it now, or we can wait a week. But more importantly, you took your daughter, age 7?
7.5, yes.
7.5. You took her to Yankee Stadium on Saturday for her first baseball game. So as promised, we were going to get the full report. My first question, what time did you arrive to the game?
We got there to the parking lot probably a little bit after 12 o'clock for a 1 o'clock game.
Okay. So you were there for
we drove
the intros.
Driving to the Bronx to a Yankees game is really not for the faint of heart. It's what separates the men from the boys, because New York in general and people trying to get to a Yankees game kind of have their own driving rules. New lanes are created where no lanes exist. Curbs are driven on. Right turn from far left lanes are made right in front of you. It's quite an experience. Let's put it that way.
It's kind of like it's a little like the post-apocalyptic world in Elysium.
Exactly.
That the people on Earth are living in, I would say. That's the best comparison. Which I, by the way, kind of enjoyed that movie.
Really?
They had a little special Grantland screening for us, and it seems like people are split on whether they liked it or not. I thought it was, by default, the best big-budget summer movie I've seen. But it's not like they've been.
Kind of damning
that's not saying
praise,
anything.
I guess, but I did not see Elysium because I don't often go see movies made by multimillionaires with a quasi-socialist message about the evils of elitism.
Yeah, listen,
I wonder if I could go stay at Matt Damon's house this weekend and just kind of crash there. I think he'd be down for that because we're breaking down social barriers and we shouldn't have elites and all that. I'll see how often he takes me up on that. But that's
you would enjoy Matt Damon because for some reason he hadn't broken the Will Hunting accent out in a while and decided that the guy in Elysium should have a Boston accent, which I really appreciated.
It's good that the accent still.
We got to go up there and get these fucking people. It was great.
Nice.
Anyway, back to the game. So you show up.
We showed up.
Do you feed her right away, or did you wait on that?
Oh no, the key to the getting through the day was ample quantities of food and drink. Which the one problem is, and I hope the Yankees are listening. Their concession workers. I mean, I can't make up how slow it was, and I realize, God bless them, they're making minimum wage probably, and it's not, I wouldn't be that motivated myself. I get it, but my God Almighty, it was. I was in line for half an hour trying to get some hot dogs and a soda, and it was like my life was passing before my eyes. It was unbelievable.
Obviously this is first world problems here, but
yes.
The same thing happens at Staples Center. The people there are almost like it's literally slow motion. It's like if you said to yourself, what would it be like to watch somebody do their workday in slow motion, as if they were being filmed by slow motion cameras? That's what the experience of getting anything at Staples Center is like.
And for some
I don't
reason,
understand.
the Yankees have a system where they
make twice as much money.
And at this particular concession stand, instead of having the hot dogs already like in a bun and pre-wrapped in foil, they have this thing where they have the buns in one area, the hot dogs are on a rotating grill-like thing, and then they have to get tongs and get paper and take the hot dog bun out and then go and get the hot dog. Now, I'm not expecting like a 5-star restaurant service at Yankee Stadium. Like if the hot dogs were made a week ago and pre-wrapped in foil, that's what I expect, because it would get me out of the concession area back to my seat more quickly. So I think they might need some efficiency experts to come in and take a look at the operation there.
I mean, it's common sense, right? If you can sell twice as much food and drink as you normally sell, then you make twice as much money. But so all you have to do is pay people more,
right?
It should be like Starbucks. Like you should be it should be like an airport Starbucks where there's a 30-person line, but it's flying.
Exactly, and
then you're back in your seats.
Absolutely interminable. So that's a murder. And I mean, I would think that they'd want to have the turnover of selling as much as they possibly can at the exorbitant prices they're selling it for, so that you're quicker volume and you're selling much more volume. It just doesn't make any sense to me. So that was horrible. But once we got food and we're in our seats, she was very excited, and she would read up on the board.
Well, hold on a second, though.
Sorry.
Wait, hold on. So you start out by waiting in a long line, which is never great with a little kid.
Mm-hmm.
But then you get to the seats. Now you have some momentum.
Well, before the seats, actually, somebody had told me ahead of time, and the Yankees do a very good thing. I've just damned them, so now I'll praise them. You can go up to an area behind Section 128, and you can get a certificate, and you give them your kid's name, and they print it out of the kid's first game and the date and the opponent. So we have a very nice Yankees certificate with her name on it and who the opponent was and the date. So we have a nice little memento of our day, and that's free, so you can't argue with that. Is there space to put in there how badly the Yankees got creamed in the game, or no? Do you have to add that after the fact? She'll have to look up in the future on whatever the equivalent of the internet is in the future to see the results. No, they don't put that on there. What about, is there space in there to talk about how she was there as the weekend Mariano Rivera's career was ending? No, see, or do you have to add that too? This was Saturday, so they couldn't predict the future on that one, Oh, okay. Okay. All right, so go ahead. So I wrote on the back of it, though, that it was probably one of Phil Hughes' last starts as a Yankee, though. That was my own little addendum to that. So a Phil Hughes farewell, Pharewell. Farewell, exactly. Phil. Exactly. So you're there for a couple innings. The seats were good, and it was kind of like we were, it was a nice sunny day, but we had a little overhang, so we weren't exposed to the sun completely, so it was comfortable. We didn't have anybody really obnoxious around us. There was a guy behind us that kept saying, literally every single batter, "Come on, Phil, get him out," just like that, kind of a sing-songy monotone. That drove me crazy, but it didn't really bother her too much, and she enjoyed cheering for the players. And all she really knows are the Yankees and the Red Sox, so she was intrigued that there was a third team, the Detroit Tigers, involved in this game. So that was a little tough to wrap her head around. Was she disturbed at all by the fumes of Mariano Rivera's decomposing career, or no? No, she was actually mesmerized by the chance to see an iconic first ballot Hall of Famer like him. Oh, it's good. Like watching Babe Ruth or Lou Gehrig pitch, really. I mean, an all-timer, a great. It's like watching Babe Ruth. The game. It's like watching Babe Ruth pitch right now if he was here. Oh man, I put that one on a tee for you. Thank you, I appreciate it. So, about how many innings pass before she gets bored and wants to either walk around or she needs more food or drink? Well, the food or drink was a constant flow. I mean, she liked the fact that vendors walk around and she could see cotton candy floating by, and so we had to step in for cotton candy, which she then inhaled, and I was worried about her bouncing off the windows of the car on the way home when it was complete sugar high. But actually, the opposite happened, that she completely crashed as soon as we got back to the car. But there was hold on, I have to interject really quickly. Yeah, I think cotton candy is it's roughly the equivalent of just selling cocaine to kids. Oh, it totally is. I mean, it's just sugar. That's the only ingredient, I believe, and food coloring. I wrote a column about this once when I took my daughter to her first Clipper game, and the biggest mistake I made, because she really threw a couple good innings there at the Clippers game, but then
it was the combination of like a cotton candy plus a Sprite or a Coke, some soda, and it just, her eyes were practically rolling in the back of her head by midway through the third quarter. I had to get out of there. And then they start kicking the person's seat in front of you, but your daughter's older, so
she handled it quite well. I was reticent about the cotton candy, and my wife kind of gave me a look, but the kid is kind of bored at the game, and she's excited. The thing that got her the most excited was the man bringing cotton candy in her vicinity. So, what father could say no to that? And because she had inhaled like a gallon of soda in addition to the cotton candy, there was frequent trips to the bathroom. But the beauty of having daughters is that my wife was there, so she could take her to the bathroom, because really no 7.5-year-old girl should see the things that go on in a Yankee Stadium men's room. No 43-year-old man should see them, frankly, but certainly not a 7.5-year-old girl.
I was going to say no 27.5-year-old girl should see it either.
Exactly.
So, at what point of the game were you really focused on just getting to the seventh inning stretch and then leaving?
Well, the fact that the game was a horrific blowout, and it was, Phil Hughes gave up gopher ball after gopher ball, so it was, 6-0 before you even blinked an eye. And then Lyle Overbay put the Yankees on the board with a home run. The Yankees had a little mini rally where they had a couple guys on and did nothing, and I was demoralized by that. And then they brought in Jabba, who promptly gave up a 3-run homer to make it 9-1 at that point, or 9-2. And I said, she was fine, but I had had enough at that point. So in the interest of trying to get out of there before traffic, we left at about the seventh inning. But we took a tour on the way out, we had to go through, of course, the team shop and buy her a Yankees trinket of some sort. So
when you said you'd had enough of the game or Jabba?
Both.
Okay.
I had my fill of both, frankly. So
is there any way to get rid of Jabba and Phil Hughes in the same trade?
Well, I think they're both free agents at this year, so it was a pleasure to see one of their final swan songs at Yankee Stadium here as they play out the string.
All right, I have two last questions here about this. One, on a scale of 0 to 10, if you had to average your daughter's level of boredom throughout the game, what rating would you give it?
I'm not sure how to rate this. Is 10 abject boredom and 0 is completely into it?
I would say 10 is abject boredom.
Okay. She was surprisingly good. I'd say she was on the low end. I'd say she was like a 2. She was more into it than I expected her to be.
Oh, that's good. That's a bonus.
I think she liked the crowd. The game, she could take or leave, but all the side things, the things on the scoreboard, like the subway races and cotton candy and Yankees trinkets, that all excited her, and like just the crowd and everything. She enjoyed that. She was less bored than I expected her to be, quite frankly.
I'm taking my 2 children to a baseball game soon, and my daughter is weaned on hockey. I mean, my daughter's like a legitimate hockey fan. I think she's been to like 60 games the last 2 years. And hockey it's kind of the opposite of baseball in every respect. It's fast. Guys are hitting each other during every break. There's, stuff going on in the Jumbotron, and it's constant ADD. And then you have just the 2 intermissions where you go and you get food and drink, which is actually kind of genius. Mm-hmm. Baseball is the opposite. You're just kind of sitting there waiting for stuff to happen. And I feel like I'm really worried about whether hockey has just ruined her for going to a baseball game. But as you said, like with the food and drink elements, if you manage them properly, it can really get you through the whole game. You just get that. I'm not doing the cotton candy, though. I can't. I just feel like it's too risky for my kids because they're maniacs anyway.
Although I just said she was like a 2 on the boredom scale, and she seemed to be into it, I do have to say that when we left the game, we left the stadium, and so I want to go like in a full sprint to get to my car as quickly as I possibly can so we can get on the road, because if you get stuck in the traffic leaving Yankee Stadium, I mean, it's post-apocalypse part 2, and you don't want to be in that traffic forever. So I'm trying to hustle, and we're walking to our car, and we parked in a lot over by where the train station is, and so there's bomb-sniffing dogs there. There's this guy, NYPD, I believe, officer with a big German Shepherd, and so my daughter sees the dog, and he sees her looking, and he calls her over, and he lets her pet the dog for like about 5 minutes while I'm like looking at my watch and stamping my foot, trying to get to go into the car. And all she talked about after the fact to my mother, who was watching our other daughter, was about the dog, and the dog's name was Hammer, and he's a bomb-sniffing dog, and he was so nice. So I'm like, Daddy could have saved himself like $500 and just taken her to one of our friends' house that has a dog and let her pet the dog for 3 hours. So,
or you could have just driven there and just hung out with the bomb-sniffing dog for an hour.
Just driven over and let her pet a bomb-sniffing dog, yes.
Is there a way to work in cotton candy with bomb-sniffing dogs?
Right.
If there is, that could work really nicely.
Probably could have brought my own cotton candy from the grocery store if they sell that there, and just had her pet this big, mean-looking German Shepherd that I was worried it was going to go for my throat, but he liked her, so that was good. That was the highlight. Like, that's what she told everybody about. So,
well,
kids,
It sounds like it went okay.
Yeah, actually.
It doesn't sound like it's going to happen 20 times a year, though.
No. The drive alone, took a couple of years off my life to and from there, but it was fun. It went better than I expected. And now my other daughter, she's 2, just turned 2, so I'm about 4 or 5 years away from her first game, and then I can have 2 of them there. So we'll see how that goes.
So this Rivera thing.
Yes.
Do you just plan on spending his last 6 weeks of relief appearances just with close family? Or, like, what's going to happen? Are you going to take visitors as it happens?
There's a lot of Mariano Rivera final season memorabilia you can purchase down at Yankee Stadium. Shirts and hats and plaques and posters. And the Yankees are really, really milking that for all it's worth. But no, he's had these in the past where he has a couple of blips. The sad thing is, obviously the Yankees are not going to be in the postseason, and so to have his career end basically on a team playing out the string, you would hope that his career would end in October with a World Series victory, obviously, if Hollywood is writing the script. But I have no concerns about him, and he was great all year, and he's going through a little rough patch here, but c'est la vie. If nothing else, it ends the speculation of people saying, well, they're crazy to let him retire and they should throw the bank at him for next year, because you can point to this as saying, well, maybe it's, maybe he's picked the right time,
Are we sure he didn't retire a week and a half ago?
I'm pretty sure.
Now, I have a lot of respect for Rivera. The Yankee fans always get mad when we poke fun of each other. The Red Sox fans get mad at me when you make Red Sox jokes. They're like, "Why don't you defend Rivera?"
Right.
And then when I make fun of Rivera, the people get mad. But I think people have to remember the part where we've known each other for 25 years, and
Absolutely.
This is how we discuss our two teams.
Absolutely.
Quickly though. Really, really weird week with A-Rod, capped off by yesterday, hits the home run, makes another big play. Then at the end, Brett Gardner saves the game with the walk-off.
Right.
He's rounding third base. A-Rod is inexplicably kind of not totally in the pile of guys ready to greet Brett Gardner. He's a little bit off to the side. Brett Gardner throws his helmet, which A-Rod happily catches. Brett Gardner jumps in. A-Rod decides not to jump in on all the other people jumping in on Gardner. It's almost like I don't know what he was trying to accomplish other than that he was clearly just standing out in the camera shot.
Yeah.
And then he waits and waits and waits and then gives Brett Gardner this big hug. And I was just sitting there thinking, like, this is so bizarre. Like, this guy's career has been thrown into a dumpster and he's out, like, just kind of gutting through it. And I don't want to say I admire him, but it is kind of.
It's almost like he knew if he got in the pile, he'd be the focus of everything, so he didn't want to detract from that or something.
It just struck me like what a crazy situation this whole thing is, and the fact that he's handling it and he actually hit a homer yesterday and is able to compartmentalize and whatever is going on in his life and can actually be like a half decent baseball player, and he's like going through the charade of being a teammate, and I just think it's one of the weirdest things I've ever seen in sports.
Well, the whole thing is super surreal, and he didn't play Saturday, the game that I went to, so I couldn't react ambivalently towards him. So that was disappointing too. I was all set to just ambivalently sit there with no reaction, and Joe Girardi didn't even give me that opportunity. So
the Willie Mays part is great, and. Willie Mays is still alive. It would be awesome if he got super cranky if A-Rod came within 6 homers of him. I'm really, really hoping and waiting for the Willie Mays grumpy 80-year-old guy just going off. Because, when you're over 70 years old, really you can say anything and get as angry as you want. And people just go, oh, whatever.
And if you're 80 years old and you're Willie Mays, you can absolutely say anything you want.
Yeah, I feel like Willie Mays could literally say anything
Yeah.
And people would be like, well, you know.
Say hey, Willie.
But, like, think if they had PEDs when Willie played. He could have played till, like, 1980.
I know, exactly.
It would have been great. He would have been the star of the 73 World Series.
Right.
Poor Willie. I don't want A-Rod to pass Willie. And I don't know why I care, but I hope that doesn't happen. Anyway, very strange week for the Yankees. All right. Thank you for we cut into your lunch break, so you better go.
Okay.
We'll talk to you soon, Johnny.
My pleasure. Talk to you soon.
Care. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Target % off. Whoa.
Thank you for downloading the BS Report with Bill Simmons.
Too much fun.
Check out more podcasts at the iTunes Music Store or at Podcenter at ESPNradio.com.
Peace out.
JackO presents Strange Saving Stories. Astronomers detected an interstellar transmission. It stated, JackO, 15 minutes could save you 15% or more. The implications were staggering. Was the cosmos telling us we could all save hundreds on car insurance with JackO? Or did their radar merely pick up a signal from the nearby Rufus and Clyde's morning show? We may never know.
JackO, 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance.